what you want, feed it back in there. But we get a lot of complaints. I could go through all these. I have funny stories probably behind every one of them. You know, I talked about some of these things already. You know, really, when you look at any of these and you put up our goals and what we're not doing, and you can kind of look at these, and most of these just fall out of that. You're saying, this doesn't match my goals. This isn't really what I'm doing. This isn't what I'm here for. My goal is not to run the fastest. My goal is, I'd rather focus on accuracy. You know, 3D hardware. That's actually a soft one because there's some interest in doing some 3D hardware. So I won't talk about that one too much. But fix existing games before adding new ones. You know, a bunch of people work on this project for free, for fun. There's really nothing better than taking some ROM set that you've never seen before, some game that you've never heard of before, figuring out how it worked, and seeing it come to life on your screen. That is like, that's an awesome moment. And I don't blame anybody for wanting to do that and replicate that over and over again. And so, you know, if that's their prerogative. It's their project, it's free, let them do what they want. You know, lots of people complain that there's a lot of porn games. Yeah, sorry. You know, we don't draw boundaries on what's in and out of Mame. If it's a video game, if it has a CPU and a video display, it's probably worth putting in Mame. I mean, you know, there's really not much beyond that. There's maybe a few other factors, but you know, it's fuzzy. But you know, I talked about documentation, open source. A lot of people have a sore spot for the fact that we're not open source, capital O, capital S, meaning GPL or BSD. It's because we have a license term that says don't use this commercially. Personally, I don't think that really buys us much. Other people disagree on the team. It's hard to get 100 people to agree on a license, so we kind of leave it the way it is. Yeah, most of the other things. So basically, stay firm to your goals. You hear all these complaints, and we hear a lot, but you know, you're starting on a new project and you tell somebody and they say, oh, why don't you do it this way? And you know, stay firm to your goal. Make sure you remember what you're really in it for, why you're doing it for yourself, and keep doing it that way. So we're inconsistent, as I said before. You may or may not know, if you don't know the history of the project, we didn't support gambling style games for personal reasons of Nicola, who started the project. We didn't support vector games for a long time. A lot of people thought, oh, vector games, they're very different from a raster game, so we shouldn't support them. I said they're still arcade games. Yeah, it's a different type of monitor. We can handle that. We changed our mind. It's okay. Laserdisc games. We've always wanted to support Laserdisc games. They're kind of a pain. There's lots of video issues that are making them kind of complicated. But we do want to support them. I mean, there are arcade games. It kind of falls in the purview there, so let's do that. At one point, we were licensed under GPL for a few versions early on. I think mines were changed early on in that. That's okay. We had a driver for Pong for a while. Pong is kind of unique in our description for what we actually do in Mame. We emulate games that have CPUs in them. Pong doesn't have a CPU. It's just all discrete logic. When you have a CPU, all the code that's running, you have CPUs. You can treat it as a black box. There's documents on how that work. You can run, and that CPU is the same in hundreds of different systems. So you can run all that code against that CPU, verify that it works exactly right. You can buy a CPU like that and verify any behaviors you don't know. CPUs are great because once all your code is running, that's running is CPU based, then it becomes a lot easier to kind of prove that you're right. With a game like Pong, we decided, you know, there's 140 odd components on Pong, or I don't know what the number is. And if we screw up one connection, or if the timing on one little thing is not right, it may look like it's working, but it's not going to work like the original thing. We have the barrier to entry to make that thing really, to give us confidence that that thing can really work just like the original, wasn't there. And so we kind of backed off on that. Now, there's been a couple of recent efforts to do some of the non-CPU games on other emulators that have some appeal, have some promise in terms of being a little more provable, a little more provable. So that may, who knows? I'm not going to predict the future of that one. We support artificial high score saving. A lot of games don't save high scores. My favorite game, Mame, does not support saving high scores. So we used to have a hack where you could do that. It turns out that that affects the way games play. So we said, well, that kind of gets in the way of game playing, and that's unfortunate because I think a lot of people who want to play the games want to keep their high scores. And, well, there's pen and paper, that works, I'm sorry. The original game didn't keep it when you powered it off, so, you know. And there's other versions of Mame that are out there that do put that stuff back in. But the official version, we want to keep that stuff out as much as possible. We used to have a policy where we had some drivers that were sort of test drivers, and we didn't really want people to use them, but they were there in the source code, and we eventually decided that was kind of a silly idea, so everything's there, you can do it. So I say stay close to your goals, but don't stay firm to your goals, but don't be too firm. Be willing to change. It makes sense to change your mind. Again, do it based on what you want to do. It's your project. Never lose sight of the fact that it's something that you're working on. So, and then there's people who just hate us. Oh man. So for a long time we were the Borg of emulators. Every other emulator out there, we were just sucking them up. We were doing every game there. Now our purview from the beginning was any arcade game is fair game. So you know, I didn't really care that there was another emulator that did it. I Borged some emulators. I take the blame for that. You know, I like those midway games and stuff. That's fine. But you know, some people never let that down. Like they feel like we killed it. And the problem with the real reason why most other emulators didn't exist is because they had a very narrow focus. They got the games they wanted to work running, and then they were done. What's more to do? The problem is, then your code rots, because you're not doing anything on it, you're done. And so do you keep it up to date? Do you keep it moving? Is there interest in your thing anymore because there's nothing new coming out of it? No, I think the reason why Mame kind of works in this environment is because we're never going to be done. And so there's always something new. There's always something to keep interest, always something to complain about. You know, it just kind of keeps things lively, and so you know that just kind of works out for us. People complain about our goals and think we're pompous egomaniacs. I like to think I'm not that pompous, but maybe I am. We make stupid decisions, you can question it, but realize that there's people out there who are gonna hate you no matter what. I mean, you could be doing the most amazing project, saving mankind, and there'll be somebody out there who has some bile for you out on the internet. Especially on the internet, oh my God. And IRC, stay away, far away, especially if you like emulation. Because IRC is sort of the cesspool of vitriol in the internet as far as I'm concerned. So I stay far away from that stuff. And I find that if you ignore it and just say, hey, you know, whatever, people are just gonna hate me, don't let that get under your skin. Because I think in the end, any project, you know, I'm sure the Donkey Kong 2 project has its haters, people who think that he did a horrible thing. And I think it's really cool. A lot of people in here probably think it's pretty cool. But you know, there are some people out there who probably send him hate mail and stuff. And so, you know, every project has it. So especially the more you get known. If you're just doing it on your own and nobody knows about you, yeah, they're not going to hate you. But once you start letting people know, then people will hate you. So just ignore them. But they exist. You're not going to defeat them. You're not going to convince them. So just ignore them. So Mame's not our job. I take Mame very seriously, like for the last 11 years on this project. But it's my spare time, and that's how I choose to do it. No wonder I'm still married. Real life does take priority, though, mostly. Yeah, some people make the wrong choice, but that's okay. There's a temptation when people complain and they say, you could do this better, you should do this different, to say, yeah, okay, that's cool. If I did this thing, they'd be really happy. Or if this thing worked better, I'd make, you know, tons of people happy. That's tempting. Ooh, making people happy, because then you have less people complaining, right? Not so much. And the whole, it doesn't really take away from the complaining. And then you're not working for yourself anymore.